Today on Forbes, meet India's self-made biologics brewmaster Billionaire. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw's booming drug business started not in a laboratory, but in a tin-roofed shed in Bengaluru, the city formerly known as Bangalore, and the capital of the southern Indian state of Karnataka. Inside, the 25-year-old was using the knowledge she had learned studying beer brewing in Australia to ferment enzymes for customers like Ocean Spray cranberry juice. Originally, she had wanted to be like her father, who was the head brewmaster at United Breweries, the big Indian firm now owned by Heineken and famous for its Kingfisher beer. But it was 1978, and she couldn't find a job. No one wanted to hire a woman as a brewer. Distraught and disillusioned, Mazumdar-Shaw put her education to another use, making enzymes for industrial uses. In partnership with an Irish entrepreneur who owned a company called Biocon and who was looking to expand to India, she set up shop inside that hot shed. She says, quote, "I call myself an accidental entrepreneur." The business became successful enough that Unilever bought it in the 1980s, along with its Irish parent. Mazumdar-Shaw stayed on to run the unit from Bengaluru until 1998, when she and her late husband, John Shaw, bought back Unilever's stake for about $2 million. It was a steal. She would eventually sell the enzymes business to Denmark's Novozymes for $115 million in 2007. By then, she had bigger things in mind. In 2000, Biocon began brewing up pharmaceuticals, starting with insulin. Insulin is a type of so-called biologic, or a drug derived from a living source, traditionally a modified version of E. coli bacteria in insulin's case. Biocon uses yeast. The company's India base enabled it to make these biologics cheaper than big Western pharma outfits. Insulin is one of the simplest biologics, which are increasingly used to treat everything from cancer to immune system disorders. More complicated biologics like gene therapies and monoclonal antibodies are difficult to make and extremely expensive. One drug for children with spinal muscular atrophy, for instance, costs more than $2 million for the one-dose treatment. It's an enormous market, but exactly how big is impossible to say. Biologics accounted for $324 billion in spending at list prices in 2023, according to healthcare research firm IQVIA, but that number doesn't account for the significant rebates that branded drug makers often offer to keep their market share, lowering what insurers and patients pay but obfuscating total costs. While a butler serves tea at her Manhattan apartment, which is adorned with landscapes by Scottish artists George Devlin and Archie Forrest, Mazumdar-Shaw says, quote, "These are very complex, expensive drugs, and therefore it's important that companies like ours focus on affordable access." Mazumdar-Shaw, now 72 years old, started out in the Indian market but now sells drugs globally and is increasingly focused on the US and Canada, which represent some 40% of its biologics sales. She realized early that finding a cheaper way to make such complex, life-saving drugs not only made them more accessible, but was also good business. Today, Biocon, which is publicly traded in India, brings in $1.9 billion in revenue by selling dozens of generic drugs and so-called biosimilar medications. The company also does contract research for other companies through its publicly traded subsidiary, Syngene. While Forbes' self-made women list includes only women from the United States, Mazumdar-Shaw would easily make the top 20 were she American. She is one of the world's wealthiest self-made female entrepreneurs, with a fortune that Forbes estimates to be $3.2 billion. The biggest part of her empire is a majority-owned private subsidiary called Biocon Biologics, which focuses on biosimilars and represents nearly 55% of the parent company's revenue. Akin to what generics are for chemically synthesized drugs, these cheaper alternatives mimic biologic drugs. As with generics, companies like Mazumdar-Shaw's are allowed to develop biosimilars after a brand-name drug's patents expire. Though biosimilars are much more expensive to make than generics, requiring more than $100 million to develop, they can drastically reduce patient costs. IQVIA estimates biosimilars have saved the US healthcare system $36 billion at list prices since 2015. With 118 more biologic drugs set to lose patent protection by 2035, the market for their cheaper mimics could be about to boom. For full coverage, check out Amy Feldman's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kiran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.